Good afternoon, everyone. This is John Rust on Freedom 95, The John Rust Show, broadcasting at 9:50 a.m. and 95.9 FM on your radio dial. On the right station for talk, broadcasting all across the beautiful fruited plain of central Indiana.
So in continuing news this week, the government continues to be shut down. Remember, folks, it's all a charade. The Republicans control the House, Senate, and the presidency. They talk about needing 60 votes in the U.S. Senate to pass a spending bill, but that's hogwash. Remember, it only requires 51 votes at any time to end the 60-vote filibuster rule. The 60-vote filibuster rule is not in the Constitution. It is only there because the Uniparty wants it. Folks like Mitch McConnell, Jim Banks, and Todd Young prefer big government spending and more massive government debt. That is what we're up against, folks. Career politician Republicans who pretend to be conservative yet vote for Democrat Biden levels of government spending and hide behind the filibuster rule to stop from being actual conservatives. It is all a uniparty clown show, just like here in Indiana. Folks, the Indiana Secretary of State is embroiled in a corruption controversy, while the IEDC takes your tax dollars to bring in new data centers, solar farms, and wind farms. Those are all being forced on Indiana by outside interests. And your tax dollars through the IEDC are being used to encourage and to directly fund it. It's why I called for Diego Morales to resign and for Governor Braun to immediately appoint me to be Indiana Secretary of State so that I can immediately stop the corruption, fight against the data centers, the high gasoline taxes. Again, we have the fourth highest gasoline tax in the nation. High sales taxes, we are the second highest. We are only behind California in our sales tax. That is insanity. We have wheel taxes, local income taxes, and property taxes in our state, which are forcing Hoosiers to lose their homes. If you own your home, you should not be paying rent to the government, period. And I want to continue to fight against the Indiana GOP establishment on tolls, which are now authorized for every mile of Indiana interstates by the establishment GOP. Folks, we must retake the Indiana Republican Party to actually be fiscally conservative. Again, I'm not a candidate. I'm not running for office. But again, as I said last week, if Indiana Governor Mike Braun asked me to be Secretary of State, how could I say no? We must fight the establishment. We must make Indiana a conservative Republican state again. Or Birch Evan by the 7th, a.k.a. Bobi, will easily win an Indiana statewide office because he is now running for Indiana Secretary of State. We must stop the Democrats from getting any Indiana statewide office, period. We are a ruby red state, yet all we have are blue, fake conservative Republicans who are driving Indiana into a fiscal hole.
I am in the studio here today with Justin. Welcome, Justin.
Thank you, John. Always love being on the show.
Well, you're always welcome. So, folks, guess what? We're talking about farming today. It's a huge topic, obviously, for Indiana, a farming state.
Absolutely. You know, John, you've come from a family of farmers. I come from a family of farmers.
Well, my mother would say we have been farming in my family for over 1,000 years.
You know, that's
on
awesome.
Both sides of my family, 100% farmers, all the way back.
That's awesome. I love it. And yeah, it's almost the same thing with my family, too. A lot of farmers. It's a great profession. It's not even a profession. It's honestly a lifestyle.
It's a lifestyle, right, exactly. So, folks, there are storm clouds on the horizon for farm prices right now, unfortunately. It's a direct result of tariffs, unfortunately. So, folks, we're going to delve right into this. This is from the Indianapolis Star. Hoosier farmers kicking off harvest season are worried time is running out to patch up a business relationship with China. This is from the Star. Indiana expects record soybeans, but farmers may lose their biggest buyer thanks to tariffs. This is from the article. It's soybean harvest season in Indiana, where the fourth largest producing state in the U.S. is expected to see record yields. But for farmers beginning this yearly ritual, the sheer amount of the crop evokes a troubling reminder. The globe's largest buyer, China, has not yet placed an order for U.S. soybeans. That's because the country is in the middle of a tariff standoff with President Donald Trump, where delaying orders for American shipments, now more expensive thanks to retaliatory tariffs, may provide China leverage in negotiations. Again, this is from the article. If a deal is not reached before South America's soybean crop is ready, the consequences for U.S. farmers could be catastrophic in the coming years. Some will have to cut back on their costs, said corn and soybean farmer Brian Warpup. Those with tight margins could soon hear from the banks they have loans with. The Warren, Indiana farmer doesn't know anyone who's lost their farm from the squeeze so far, but the concern is real. If things don't change in the next year, he added, I will know somebody. There could be some relief on the way, but that's not certain. Trump indicated that he wants to use tariff revenue to supply aid to farmers. Still, 62% of Indiana's crop is exported, the majority of which goes to China. So, folks, the reason I'm talking about this, as of now, China has not bought 1 bushel of American soybeans since June of this year. Not 1 bushel. You know, this is not good for our farmers. These trade deals are a fresh blow for the U.S. farmer who is missing out on billions of dollars of soybean sales to China. You know, folks, I am all about fair trade, importing goods from China if the appropriate tariff is paid. And by that I mean we shouldn't be importing stuff made with slave labor to compete with American-produced items. So it goes into a broader discussion of tariffs in general and why you have tariffs. I am all for tariffs for products coming in that are unfairly competing with American industry. In Seymour, we have a post hole digger plant that makes post hole diggers. They have to pay Social Security, they have to pay Medicare and Medicaid taxes for their workers. A post hole digger made in China does not. They should. That is about having a level playing field. That's about having fair trade.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, the amount of money coming in from tariffs is not what we were projected to be receiving. So listen to this. Tariffs funded just 4.28% of federal government spending in August. You know, this is from Advancing American Freedom. Tariffs brought in $29.5 billion in August. The deficit was $345 billion. This is from Lisa on Twitter. Apple plans to shift assembly of all U.S. sold iPhones to India from China as soon as next year. Folks, why aren't we producing those iPhones here? Why do those phones have to be made in India?
Exactly. If we produce them here, then that could be more jobs here and more money into our economy. Why are we outsourcing these to other countries?
If something has to be made by slave labor for you to be able to afford it, you probably shouldn't be buying it.
Exactly.
This is from the Ford Chief Executive Officer, Jim Farley. He just went on Fox Business and he said he's all in on Trump's tariff policies. Says Ford is perfectly positioned to win big in this new era. We think Trump's policies are really great for this country. We support the president's initiative. You know, this is from Warren Buffett. We should be looking to trade with the rest of the world, and we should do what we do best. And they should do what they do best. You know, I agree with that. Indiana is wonderful at producing soybeans, but we should be allowed to sell them in China. We should be allowed to sell them anywhere in the world. Where we're not allowed to sell them, where China is using American farmers as a weapon in a trade war, that shows exactly why Trump has to fight back. We have to fight for the American farmer.
We do. Absolutely, we do.
This is from Chuck Grassley, U.S. Senator from Iowa on this. Farmers very upset about Argentina selling soybeans to China right after the United States bails out Argentina. Still, 0 U.S. soybeans have been sold to China. Meanwhile, China is still hitting the USA with a 20% retaliatory tariff. We need a China trade deal now. Farmers need markets to boost our farm economy. Amen. I believe in reciprocal tariffs. You know, if there's a 15% tax in Europe on U.S. cars going to Europe, and we only have a 5% tax on cars from Europe coming in the United States, that's not fair.
It's not.
It should be equal. It should match exactly what the tariff rate is that Europe charges to us.
It should.
Well, and this is from Trump. If you go back to 1913, That is when they ended tariffs. We were the richest country ever from 1850. It was all tariffs. We didn't have any income taxes from 1850 to 1913. We were the richest we ever were proportionately where we were in 1887 around that time. This is from Dylan Allman. If you want the prosperity of that pre-1913 economy, you have to take the whole architecture that produced it. You can't just levy tariffs and call it a day. There was a hard gold standard, no central bank, no federal income tax, tiny federal spending, minimal national regulation, and none of the progressive era machinery that came after. This is from Dylan Allman. Tariffs were the primary revenue swap for a government that barely existed compared to today. Tariffs now get stapled on top of a fiat currency, a central bank that monetizes deficits, and an income tax code thicker than a phone booth, and a welfare state that eats half the economy.
I think what it boils down to is the government got too big and too powerful.
So again, folks, we're talking about China not buying American grain. U.S. farm trade deficit is widening. Exports trailed imports by a record volume in the first half of 2025. You know, I will say on this, we have to have reciprocal tariffs with China. If they're not going to buy American grain, why on earth are we bringing in Chinese products here?
Exactly. We can't. We have to stop being ripped off by these.
Well, it's
other
all about
countries.
fair trade. Listen to this, folks. President Trump said on August 25th of this year, we're going to allow 600,000 of China's students to come in. 600,000.
I mean, that's an insane amount.
But they're not buying our grain. You know, and all this is happening at a terrible time for farmers while our national debt keeps increasing, and that is crippling not just taxpayers, not just farmers, but every Hoosier. You know, listen to this. This is from Turning Point USA. The national debt has surpassed $18 trillion. When will people wake up? Folks, that was written on December 4th, 2014. We are over $34 trillion in debt today. That is what is bankrupting America, pure and simple. Since both Jim Banks and Todd Young have been in Congress, they have voted for trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of new government debt.
These politicians, they say they're fiscal conservatives, but then they go out and vote for this. I mean, it's absolutely, like you said, I like the term you use, hogwash. It's hogwash that they do this. We as the voters need to start holding them accountable for their trash voting record.
Well, I think we need to elect political leaders, and I agree with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis on this. As governor of Florida, I get this great cheat code. All I got to do is look to New York, Illinois, and California, and then do the exact opposite. Folks, what Indiana is doing is exactly what they are doing. You know, Indiana only trails New York and Illinois and California in the gasoline tax.
It's like, yeah, we saw what they were doing, and we said, oh, we want to do that. And it's like, no, we should be following Ron DeSantis, who personally I think is the best governor in the country at this point. We should be following his lead and make Indiana just as great as the state of Florida. But unfortunately, our elected politicians care more about lining their own pockets and staying in office than actually improving the lives of us and our state.
So, folks, listen to this. This is from Wall Street Apes. An American works at a quick lane tire and auto center and shows their oil change price signs. In just 1 year, the price has increased from $39.95 for a basic oil change to $59.95 to now $69.95. They have over 775 locations. Guess who the largest shareholder is? BlackRock. Guess who BlackRock funds? Todd Young and Jim Banks. Folks, it always follow the money. All those with Jim Banks always follow the clinking champagne glasses in Virginia. So, folks, we'll be right back. This is John Rust on the Radio. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on the Radio, broadcasting at 9:50 a.m. and 95.9 FM on your radio dial on Freedom 95, the right station for talk. Here in the studio with Justin. Welcoming in, Justin. So this is from Bob Good, folks. House Republicans failed us with yet another Democratic continuing resolution. We're talking about the recent government shutdown. The Republicans are keeping Democratic policies and spending levels, use the shutdown to cut spending and the federal workforce. Now, this is from Donald J. Trump. I cannot believe the Republicans are extending the debt ceiling. I am a Republican and I am embarrassed. Guess when he wrote that, folks? January 23rd, 2013. Listen to this. This is from Donald J. Trump. No member of Congress should be eligible for re-election if our country's budget is not balanced. Deficits not allowed. He wrote that on July 31st, 2012. Again, folks, the Indiana GOP establishment keeps forcing people like Jim Banks on us who vote for massive debt increases repeatedly now. You know, when Jim Banks was sworn into Congress, your share of the national debt was $170,000 per taxpayer. Today it's over $325,000.
Just continues to get worse and worse, and they don't do anything to stop it.
Well, we need more people like Thomas Massie. You know what his Liberty score is in Congress? 96%. You know, Jim Banks a year ago came to Indiana visiting from Virginia. Guess who he was traveling around here with?
I'd say probably someone like Lindsey Graham or something like that.
Exactly, Lindsey Graham. Guess what his Liberty score is? An F, 43%. Folks, we need real conservatives, not these fakes that come into the state and thump their chest and then vote the exact opposite. If something's broke, you need to fix it. We can't keep just continuously increasing our nation's debt. And at home here in Indiana, we can't keep increasing property taxes. You know, it's why Ron DeSantis says home ownership means you should own it free and clear of the government. Property tax is really rent paid to the government for property you own. The Indiana GOP establishment, folks, is all about big government. You know, the median salary for a federal government employee now is $90,000 per year. The median salary for a private sector employee is $61,000 per year. The private sector employee that makes 2/3 the money pays the salary of the federal government employee, and that doesn't include benefits. Folks, these people are thieves. Well, and the government shut down. Do you think they didn't get paid? Of course they got paid. We're up against not only the establishment GOP, but we are up against a lunatic left. You remember Joy Reid on MSNBC, ultra left wing?
Oh, yeah, I can't forget her.
She has this to say. They want to take us back to no income tax, no regulations, earn what you want, family inherits everything. Amen. I agree 100%. That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that should be the Republican slogan right there.
Exactly.
So what's got shoved under the rug in all this talk about the government shutdown was what's happening on the Epstein files. You know, Republicans canceled votes on September 29th and 30th, delaying the final signature on Representative Thomas Massie's discharge petition. We need transparency and justice for the survivors. Release the full Epstein files. Why are they continually working to stop their release? Did you know that not one single person who paid to rape children on Epstein's Island has been arrested? Will the Epstein victims ever see justice? You know, there was a bill in front of the U.S. Senate a few weeks ago, and guess who voted to stop the release of the Epstein files in the Senate? Both Jim Banks and Todd Young.
And, you know, I believe that we should vote them out of office just for that.
You know, Speaker Johnson is delaying a new congresswoman swearing in just to spite Representative Massie and prevent getting her signature on the Epstein discharge petition. You can't hold out forever, Speaker Johnson. That's from Amity Lee 13 on Twitter. You know, folks, why is Aaron Hounchin and all the Republican leadership in the House working to block the release of the Epstein files? Why is Jim Banks and Todd Young voting to block release of the Epstein files from the United States Senate?
I mean, it seems to me that they must not care about the victims, I guess. I mean, what other conclusion can you take from that? If they actually cared about the victims, you'd think they'd be chomping at the bit to get everything released so that we could prosecute these people to the fullest extent of the law.
Well, it comes back to, I believe conservatives should be harsh on crime. Unfortunately, Jim Banks and Todd Young are not. Both Jim Banks and Todd Young voted for the First Step Act, which released violent criminals and sex offenders early from prison.
I mean, no conservative, no Republican should be voting for something like that.
Well,
we call ourselves the people who are tough on crime, but yet we release these violent people.
Well, this is from an article in Fox News by Greg Ray. There are more than 100 violent criminals and sex offenders who have been released under the First Step Act, according to data from the administration. The data, first obtained exclusively by Tucker Carlson tonight on Fox News, seemingly contradicted promises from lawmakers that the legislation would largely only affect prisoners sentenced for minor drug-related offenses. Of 2,243 inmates released under the First Step Act, only 960 were incarcerated for drug-related offenses. On the other hand, 496 were in prison for weapons and explosive-related crimes, using a gun to commit a crime, 239 for sex offenses, 178 for bribery, fraud, and extortion, 118 for burglary and larceny, and 106 for robbery. Another 59 were imprisoned and again released early thanks to this bill supported by Jim Banks and Todd Young, who both voted yes for it. Another 59 were released early from prison when they were imprisoned for homicide and aggravated assault. Wow. And that includes Mohammed Youssef Hammoud, a terrorist financer for Hezbollah.
And horrific murder of Irina Zarutska on that train, because her murderer was released many, many times for violent crimes, and yet he's still...
Yeah, I believe he had 14 prior convictions. Well, if you do the crime, you have to do the time. This is from Senator John Kennedy from Louisiana. Good intentions sometimes have nothing to do with actual consequences. We were told this would only allow low-level, non-violent criminals to go free. I didn't believe it, and I never voted for it. And now we find out the first group of prisoners let free, 500 of them had weapons or explosive crimes, 250 were for sex crimes. Wow.
I'd love to see... I don't
he
even know.
He voted no. Todd Young and Jim Banks voted yes. Well, and then these people like Jim Banks have the gall to repost stuff about people who are affected by fentanyl dealers, even though fentanyl dealers were released from prison early due to the First Step Act. It's just awful.
It's rich coming from those people. I just can't believe they have the gall to do stuff like that sometimes. To pretty much.
Well, Jim Banks and Todd Young they're both voting to release criminals from prison early.
Mm-hmm.
And they're voting to block the release of the Epstein list. They both voted to block the release of the Epstein list. That says it all.
It really makes you think about the priorities of these people,
Well, this is from Matt Vanswell. What's stopping the GOP from forcing daily votes on ultra-popular, single-issue bills throughout the Trump term? Even if Democrats opposed them and voted no, these bills would poll at 90% and set up the GOP to dominate the midterms. But they aren't doing that. Why? And I would add, do it, get rid of the filibuster, and actually pass them. President Trump would sign them. And we would have massive enthusiasm for reelecting Republicans to Congress next year. The alternative is worse. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely do not support any Democratic candidate for any office, especially here in Indiana or in Washington, D.C. But let's do better and actually elect conservative Republicans to Congress, not these career politicians.
Yeah, I want to mention this. This is why it's so important to actually vote in your GOP primaries so that we can get actual conservative Republicans into office. And if it comes to it, run in your GOP primary, because sometimes there might not be a good Republican in the primary. So just run yourself.
And what's happening is, and this is why I'm so disappointed in the Republicans today, we have a generational coalition. We have momentum. And the Republicans in Congress, what are they doing? All they can do is post on social media. This is from Chernovich. These aren't men of dignity or honor. They are farm animals. Good grief. We as conservatives voted for conservatives in Washington, and we are getting delivered nothing but liberal results. Look at what this bill that both Jim Banks, Todd Young, and Aaron Houchin, they all voted for, was continued spending at Biden levels. That says everything, folks.
Exactly. At this point, if we still wanted the Biden stuff, we could have just elected the Democrats. But we as Americans said no. We don't want no more of this Biden guy and these Biden policies. We want to go with the Republicans. So that's why we voted Republicans and we elected Republicans. But yet we're still getting liberal Democrat policies. It's ridiculous.
Well, and 2 days before he died, Charlie Kirk said we should release all the Epstein files. To honor one of his last wishes, we should make sure this gets done.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
This is the direct words from Charlie Kirk. The Department of Justice should immediately move to unseal all the Epstein files. Every file should be released to the public. Well, Jim Banks and Todd Young are saying no. They voted against it. This is from Aaron McIntyre. At some point, it would just be more dignified for the Republicans in Congress to come out and just say, we don't really control the government, and despite winning elections, the whole thing is a scam. And this is the key, folks, because the other option is that they do have the power to fix things, but are total cowards. They refuse to act. Folks, we're out of time on this segment. When we come back, we're going to talk about health care on The John Rush Show on Freedom 95. We'll be right back. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on Rust on the Radio, The John Rush Show on Freedom 95, the right station for talk, broadcasting at 9:50 a.m. and 95.9 FM, broadcasting all across the beautiful fruited plain of our beautiful state of Indiana.
It truly is the best state in the nation, isn't it? Most beautiful, for sure.
Absolutely. So, folks, we're talking about health care in this segment. This final cigarette commercial aired in January of 1971. Let's work together to have the last big pharma ad air in 2025.
I think that's a wonderful idea.
Folks, you know what our health insurance premiums are doing. This is from Wall Street Mav. Health insurance is now a scam. The deductibles are so high, you end up paying for, number one, all of your monthly insurance premium payments. Number two, the insurance pays for nothing because you haven't reached your deductible. Number three, most people never reach their deductible each year. This is from Wall Street Apes. Americans say their health insurance plan is now so expensive, she has to decide if she should keep her insurance or lose her home. I got a letter today from Blue Cross Blue Shield, and my monthly premiums went up to $2,627 a month. She is giving up hope. If I choose health insurance, I lose my house. If I choose my house, I lose my health insurance. Either way, I'm kind of screwed. And I'm not even mad. I just don't care anymore. I guess there's just no winning. Folks, don't give up hope. This is again from Wall Street Apes. American healthcare worker explaining their Anthem health insurance plan. They pay in $1,500 per month for health insurance. It's $6,800 before insurance covers anything. I have not one time in my near 60-year career hit my deductible. Folks, you have to look at the bigger picture. Did you know Eli Lilly is spending $11 billion on new plants in Virginia and Texas? So this is from the Organic Group on Twitter. She asks, why not here? We have the talent and the history. What's the deal? Well, folks, guess who lives in Virginia?
Jim Banks.
That's right. And guess who Eli Lilly has been funding? Jim Banks. Massive donations to Jim Banks.
Like you said before, follow the money.
Always follow the money and the clinking champagne glasses. In general, folks, in terms of health care, we've been told for a long time that eating red meat is bad for you. I remember when they said that eggs were bad for you. It's absolutely the opposite. Eggs are wonderful for you. Listen to this. This is from the New York Post. Eating meat not linked to higher risk of death and may even protect against cancer-related mortality. That's from an article by Angela Stabile on Fox News. This is from the article. Eating more meat could be beneficial for the body, a new study suggests. Recent research from Canada's McMaster University revealed that animal-sourced foods are not linked to a higher risk of death. The study discovered that animal proteins could in fact offer protective benefits against cancer-related mortality, according to a press release from the university. The results revealed no increased risk of death in association with eating more animal protein. The data also showed a modest but significant reduction in cancer-related mortality. This is from Jeffrey A. Tucker. Why can health insurers not offer catastrophic-only plans? We know the reason. Because they would be wildly popular and put an end to the whole scam. And this is talking about reforms to improve the U.S. medical system. The insurers want you to be forced to pay big bucks for services you don't use. This is how and why the biggest players in the industry warmed up to Obamacare. It's privatized socialism and not really insurance at all. But boy, they have the money for Jim Banks.
Oh, yeah.
This is from the Indy Star. Nonprofit hospitals' tax benefits are intended to enable them to provide support to people. Guess how much Indiana's nonprofit hospitals reported last year in profits? Guess.
I'll say $2 million.
$1 billion, with a B, $1 billion in profits.
From a nonprofit?
Yes, from a nonprofit.
From a nonprofit, you're getting $1 billion in profits. So okay, that checks out. That definitely checks out. That's wild. That's all I can say. That's just wild.
So while we're talking about healthcare, I want to read something from Governor DeSantis of Florida. They say it's healthcare to cut off the private parts of a 14 or 15-year-old. That is not healthcare. That is mutilation.
100%. Another example of Governor Ron DeSantis being 100% on point.
This, I saw this meme on Twitter, folks, and it's absolutely true. It says, your dog ain't vegan and your child isn't trans. If a man wants to pretend he's a woman, that's up to him. But if he wants us to pretend he's a woman, that's up to us. This is from Trans Diaries, and they were going after J.K. Rowling. J.K., how do you know a stranger is a man or a woman without forcing them to undress or undergo a medical examination? J.K. Rowling posts back, I have a superpower called eyesight.
100%. I think that people need to understand that there's like a baseline for like what a man is and what a woman is, and it's obvious what they are. But unfortunately, the left, they don't want to accept this fact. They always get caught up in their feelings and all that, and it's just a bunch of hogwash, as you would say.
So, folks, we're out of time on this segment, but when we come back, we're going to talk about January 6th. This is John Rust on the Radio on Freedom 95. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on Freedom 95, 950 AM and 95.9 FM on your radio dial, the right station for talk. So we are talking about now, January 6th. The Republicans regained the House of Representatives in 2022. And who should have been chairman of the January 6th committee had it stayed in effect? Jim Banks. You know why the January 6th committee was disbanded? Because Jim Banks wanted to run for the U.S. Senate. There's a little known fact, folks. If you're in Congress and you're chairman of a committee, you cannot run for the United States Senate. They have a rule about that. He would have had to give up his chairmanship had that committee still existed. And if you recall, there was a big to-do between Jim Banks and Nancy Pelosi about him being on the committee originally when it was formed. She would not allow him on. When he had the chance with a Republican majority to chair the committee, he ran for the hills. Instead of investigating January 6th, they let the committee disband. That's dishonorable. The Republicans had the subpoena power. The Republicans had the majority. So we heard nothing other than tweets, no official action from the Republican majority Congress on the January 6th committee, all from 2022 to 2024, folks. The only people we heard from on this was President Trump. But there was so much news about it, and there was so much news in right-leaning talk radio. Listen to this, folks. This is breaking news. Freedom of Information Act requests show a dozen phone calls between the cell phone of Ray Epps and the office of Nancy Pelosi in the week before January 6th. If you recall, Ray Epps was one that was allegedly encouraging people to break the law and to enter into the Capitol. Why was he talking to Speaker Pelosi?
Exactly. That's a very interesting question.
Well, that would have been a really fascinating question for the January 6th committee under the chairmanship of Jim Banks. But they didn't want that committee to exist anymore. They just let it go away.
Exactly. That just shows you that they lack leadership qualities.
Well, it shows you he was only interested in advancing his career as a career politician, to move from Congress to the Senate.
Exactly. And that's not what a leader does.
Just jumping from one boat to another.
Exactly. A leader cares
When he
more.
had the opportunity, when Republicans had the majority, it was wasted. Again, it's just like today with Republicans having the presidency, the House and the Senate, how Republicans are refusing to cut government spending, how Republicans are refusing to work to cut the national debt. Instead, they are only increasing it by trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. But this January 6th thing, there is so much more on this. Listen to this. Did you know that Nancy Pelosi's son-in-law, Michael Voss, took a selfie with Jacob Chansley on the Capitol steps on the morning of January 6th? Do you remember Jacob Chansley? He was the one with the large bull horns on his head. Do you remember that?
I remember him now.
Why was Nancy Pelosi's son-in-law taking a picture with him?
Exactly. That's kind of fishy, don't you think?
That might be another topic for the January 6th committee to look into. The big news on this, and this is a huge scandal, again, for 2 years, Jim Banks did nothing on this. But listen to President Trump. This was just recently. It was just revealed that the FBI had secretly placed, against all rules, regulations, and protocols and standards, 274 FBI agents into the crowd just prior to and during the January 6th hoax. This is different from what Director Christopher Wray stated over and over again. That's right. As it now turns out, FBI agents were at and in the January 6th protests, probably acting as agitators and insurrectionists, but certainly not as law enforcement officials. I want to know who each and every one of these so-called agents are and what they were up to on that now historic day. Many great American patriots were made to pay a very big price only for their love of their country. I owe this investigation of dirty cops and crooked politicians to them. Christopher Wray, the then director of the FBI, has some major explaining to do. That's two in a row, Comey and Wray, who got caught lying with our great country at stake. We can never let this happen to America again. That is from Donald J. Trump, our president. And again, guess who did absolutely no investigating on this, as he should have been as chairman of the January 6th committee? Jim Banks dropped the ball. He didn't want to do it.
Exactly. This so-called conservative fighter ran away from the fight.
That's exactly it. Then Congressman Jim Banks is exactly symbolic and representative of what's wrong with Washington. This is from Steve Loves America on Twitter. We are still not talking about this enough. Members of Congress are exempt from Obamacare. Members of Congress are exempt from vaccine mandates. Members of Congress are exempt from insider trading crimes. Members of Congress are exempt from the Freedom of Information Act. Members of Congress are exempt from FISA warrantless spying. Members of Congress are exempt from term limits. Congress has always been the problem. America's founding fathers must be rolling in their graves.
What I'm hearing is rules for thee, but not for me.
We just have a Congress that has refused to do anything. This is from Wall Street Apes. It actually happened. Cars are now being sold with their full horsepower locked behind a paid subscription. Volkswagen just did something that should make every car owner furious. They are selling their electric ID3 car with its full horsepower locked behind a paid subscription. The car comes from a factory with 228 horsepower, but if you don't pay the monthly fee, its software is limited to just 201 horsepower. So for $22 a month, they'll flip a digital switch and unlock the power that is already inside the car you paid for. First, BMW tried to sell you a subscription for the heated seats. Now Volkswagen is selling you a subscription for your engine. Their defense, it gives customers a sportier driving experience without a higher initial purchase price. But this isn't just about cars. This is the future they want for everything. What's going to come next? Can you imagine a monthly key to use the high heat on your oven or the fast cycle on your dishwasher? You don't own the products, you're just renting its best features. That's from Wall Street Apes. Folks, this is where Congress should be acting. If you buy something, if you have a bill of sale, you own it. Again, you shouldn't be paying rent to the car company to use the windshield wipers. And in a nutshell, that's what they're doing. And it's the same with property tax. You should not be paying rent to the government for property you already own. So folks, we're out of time. I want to close this with my father's favorite Bible verse, Psalm 118, verse 24. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. This is John Rust on the Radio.